the reason that Saavn started, the genesis of Saavn, is really the fact that we as co-founders are music lovers and music fanatics. You have to, be in love with the thing that is your business, otherwise it's never going to do well, even years down the road. And we happen to, as co-founders, grow up as North American South Asians. So we grew up listening to Indian music in the living room, and Led Zeppelin and Miles Davis and these things in our bedrooms. And what had happened was, as we sort of grew up and we saw music going digital, there was no digital India. There was no digital South Asian content. And here you have 1 billion plus people in the country that are music fanatics and music lovers, and it's in the bone. And you have some of the most brilliant indigenous content that's being made, and it was all analog. So the genesis, the kernel of Saavn was, hey, let's take it all digital. Originally started as a B2B company, which is very different than what we are today. But your history is as important as where you're going, and if it's okay, I'll just take you through that story for just a minute. But we started taking everything digital and distributing it to iTunes and eMusic and Netflix. At that time, we were doing films also. And the whole concept was to take everything that was in India, bring it digital, and be the distributor. And so we became the biggest digital distributor of content. And this is, I'm talking 2007, 2008. But we were the middleman. We were always the middleman. We would never know the end consumer. And a very true story is one time we were in Cupertino, and the team at Apple had told us that we'd become the #1 label for iTunes World. And so we said, great. We were doing, maybe 6 figures in downloads at the time. But what we felt was, okay, so we were #1 label, international label on iTunes World, but 2 things. One is everybody's misspelling South Asian content. And at the time, if you typed in Miles Davis with a Y, it would not suggest Miles Davis. Now everybody does suggested search. At the time, that was not true. But the other thing is that, as everybody knows, South Asian content is searched for by the actor and the movie title, which were not metadata fields that even existed. So that was our turning point moment to say this has to be a consumer product. We have to solve browse, search, and play. I think that one is that you don't need to start global. In fact, it's better to super saturate and have a niche, because it allows you to focus on market conditions. It allows you to focus on sensitivities in product and pricing. And I think that for us, while we have users in 150 plus countries, our core focus is to be India's music streaming service. Always has been, right? Not an Indian music streaming service, but India's. Just like Prime Minister Modi says, "Make in India." It's very present tense, but it's India's because there's multiple languages, and it's not just South Asian content. It's English, and it's Punjabi, and Telugu, and Tamil, and so on and so forth. So I think that we started with a core focus that was India. It happened to be the diasporas around the world, and we take global rights to our content. So I think when you're starting something, you want to look at it in a very sort of fine kind of neighborhood, as you say, right? And then be able to grow it once you do that well. I think if you do too much too fast, it can be very distracting. And even to this day, we get requests to launch Saavn with different content in different countries. But you have to, I think, get your epicenter right first. That would be my sort of take on that. Right? So interestingly enough, when we started the company, there used to be this saying of, we think, right? We think we should do this, we think we should do that. But we started the genesis of the company as half of a data company and half as a music company. So we started using our data, and now we do something like 500 million events a day that we record across our entire user base. And what's interesting is that as we started to look at the data, it told us where to go. It tells you if you have a negative search result, it tells you which content that you have to go out and license, right? If you have a product failure, it tells you what you should, develop on and refine in the products. From a country perspective, you can see the countries that are moving at a month-over-month clip, and so it tells you where to invest, sales resources, where to invest in marketing. So what happened is that when India and US sort of became the bookends, and then you started to see in the middle UK bubble up, right? And where Punjabi content will over-index, and you'll see UAE and Singapore and Canada, right? And these sort of few make up the kind of top 70% of usage. But really, it follows kind of the diaspora. It also follows like international taste. You will see the largest compounding growth in India, of course. As an example, our daily usage in India is 10x in 12 months, whereas across the globe it's probably 2.5x, right? So you will see a very difference in the multiples, of course, but I think you have to listen to what your own user base is telling you in terms of where to invest. So I think it's a great question, and I think that the way that, and I've built products for 15 years. I used to build products for HBO On Demand, and then HBO Go. But when you build products, you have to build it backwards from the user, not from the platform forward. So as an example, you don't build it for what this phone is capable of. You build it for what the user actually wants. We always start with pen and paper, literally drawing out things. And the way that we've always built product is starting with how do we want the product to behave. Okay, so that could be anything from the layout of it, the fact that we want it to be a one-thumb experience and not two thumbs. All these things I'm saying, by the way, if you are building anything in the app economy, you have to consider. You have to absolutely consider these things. Are people going to be mobile when they're using the apps? Do you want them reading, or do you want them to blink and notice things? We look at things that were failures in other music apps. For instance, Saavn was always built off of this idea that you could play and search at the same time. Because historically, music was always one or the other. You're playing something, or you look for something and then replace what you're playing. We wanted to go from single track to multiple tracks. So as you play, let's say, some reggae music, you can still be browsing other things, and you can add Sting and the Police to the bottom of that and never interrupt your experience. This is all built for how we wanted music to work, right? The other thing I would tell you to do when you're building products or anything is to look at analog life, look at real life, how we all share things, how we all, sharing is a great example. We used to get these tape decks and build tapes for each other. And I would make a mix, and I would give you a mix, and you would take that. Everyone has that one friend that gave that to people. We built our social features around the same thing. That's equivalently like me tagging you in something, right? And our social features are tagging people in content to replicate what is an analog experience in digital. Because those things are human. Those are still things that people identify with, right? And you can do it in anything. You can do it in commerce. You can do it in travel. You can do it in absolutely any product. So I think the biggest thing that we have done in the products is, it's not any one feature, but it's truly the performance of the app, right? So a lot of people tell us, and it doesn't always hold true because you're working in markets that have very sporadic infrastructure and a lot of demand, for on carrier networks, et cetera. But a lot of people have told us somehow your apps just work. And the reason that is a combination of things. It is, number one, is to put together a great team. If we have one asset, that's the one thing that's made us fly as a company. It is our team. It's not a single feature, and that is, of course, a feature of the company because people are thoughtful and think about these solutions end to end because they want it to work on their drive in Bandra or in Andheri or in Delhi or wherever they are, right? Because they want it to work. You reverse engineer that. But I think the biggest thing we've done in the products is to make things one-click play, as close to one click as possible. Because the more clicks you have, there's tremendous data around anything, but the more clicks that you have, the more fall-off you will have. And what we've tried to do is make things as close to one as possible. And what happens then is you get people to a value of N. Every company has an N, right? So a shopping mall has a number of stores that people walk into. If they walk into X amount of stores, they are bound to buy X amount of product, right? Netflix has a stat that if you put X amount of movies into a queue, you're less likely to churn. For us, the number is 10. So if in the first session we can get people to 10 streaming songs, the odds of them being a lifetime user are exponentially higher. So we focus on, trying to create that engaged user and that engaged experience, right? And there's so many facets, right? There's the content, there's the technology, there's just the UX of it, right? But I think ultimately, you want to deliver something that gives a collective experience of a delight. It doesn't matter what it is, because people will compare your apps to everything else. I don't compete with Facebook. I don't compete with Instagram. But people will compare Saavn to those because these are the apps that people live in. So anything you build will get compared to that. So you have to build something of, I think, delight. So I think a couple of things. I think that, every market is very different. And it takes, I think, local expertise to build the alpha companies in those markets. So not to speak about other companies, but Flipkart is the leading e-commerce player here in India, not another name who people might think, right? And Ola Cabs is the number one taxi on demand, not another name that people might think. And Saavn is the number one leading service here as well, because I think it's local contextual solutions. The reason that you see a lot of entrance into the space is because there's a huge demand for music, and music is an on-ramp to data and is an on-ramp to experience. You buy a smartphone, there's 2 million Androids shipping every week right now in India. People want messaging first, and then they want social, and then they want music, right? These happen to be the three categories where people have the most apps. You have a country like India where it has been 90+% pirated for years. But piracy is just an indicator of demand. All it is that users were digital 20 years before there were the business models and the economy that we're building now, right? So I think we're just happy that people are streaming and not stealing, and that it's digital. I think that you have to be a great product and a quality company to compete and win in the space. Not to bring it back to data, I talk about data a lot, so apologies for that, but it is a real differentiator in what you do. So anybody who's launching today or last month or in 3 months starts with that much data, and Saavn is operating with 5 years of data. So the difference is that I get a new user who downloads the app in Gurgaon, and contextually I can start them at a better spot than most services can. That helps me get to that end number I just talked about, which helps me get that user. The other thing to talk about is brand, because brand is something that you try to build, and you need consumer luck. Consumers have to want that brand, and things have to come together. I think your company, the culture you build, the products that you build, all of that, your brand is a lagging indicator of that. So if your inside of your company is not right, it will show in your brands. And you can see it with the best companies that go wrong, and you can see it with the small companies that become big. And that is a lot of why Saavn has sort of, I think, taken that leadership position. How we sustain is we invest in the right things, the right technologies, the right teams. We continue to stay focused on what we're building. Right now we're seeing compounding growth. That should continue as smartphones continue to move. Interesting point is we are over 90% mobile versus other companies that are 50-50, mobile and desktop. So I think we take competition very seriously, but we also know that we built something of quality, and ultimately, consumers will choose what is the best product out there. That is a very hard question, but I'll tell you, when you're building digital products, web or mobile, you actually build your brand app install by app install or page view by page view. So your design, your UX, your voice in the products has to be beautiful. Something goes wrong, don't say error 403. Say, oops, we messed something up, let's try again. Be human. Human is how you build brand. So the way that I look at brand is that a good brand has the same qualities of someone that you love to hang out with. It's part smart and attractive and athletic and sense of humor. These things, the human qualities, are what brands should be, right? Shouldn't be just utility, although it can be part utility, can't be just functional. It should have that feeling that you want to spend time with it. And I'll tell you the mark of a great brand, and someone told us this, not my words, but someone said that, look, comparing us to other companies, and they said, look, people want to wear a Saavn t-shirt, but they may not want to wear a t-shirt for other brands. Why is that? And I said, look, I think that there's some aspiration and there's some feeling of friendliness in that. And all this is coming from an app. It's coming from code that's building out here. But human qualities build a great brand, and you have to think about that. You want it to be funnier, or you want it to be, faster, or you want it to be just the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, or a mix of all that, But that's the best way I can explain brand. This human qualities. So I think, really there's four things, and I sometimes look at public companies and new startups and mid-stage startups, Series C startups like us, and somehow they all of them tick off these four boxes. So I'll give them to you. These are the four that I would say are the things to look at. One is a very big market opportunity. You need a big addressable market for sure, because without that, your probabilities just go lower, right? I think you need a great team. Absolutely, everything. People don't invest in PowerPoints and charts and stacks of paper. They invest in teams and people and leadership. I think you need great unit economics. Obviously, at the end of the day, you're building a business. So as you have that big addressable market and that great team, whatever problem you're solving needs to have good unit economics, right? Even if unit economics are down the road, you need to have an eye on them. Yes, you can get scale first and bring that to it, but you have to bring that to the table because you will be most likely taking capital. So you have to return on that capital. And the last is some unfair advantage. An unfair advantage can be things like you're first mover, or that you started a company but pivoted that based upon data that you had. Something that gives you a leap forward in time. Time is the asset that nobody can get back. Everybody can get money back. You can get equity back. But these four things, addressable market, great team, great unit economics, and some unfair advantage, I think you'll see those in all of the most successful companies in the world. So if you're starting out, I would at least begin to think about those boxes. So I think I can't say if it was tough or easy, because I think what's tough is building the business, right? And like my fellow co-founders started the company with literally a sheet of paper, right? Coming to India to get licenses, and now it's at Series C, right? And we've built it, from 3 people to 120 plus people now. I think the thing that you have to know about raising capital is that the business you're building, coupled with the team that you have, raises the capital, right? Not just pitching, right? It's not about that, right? The business has to have the qualities that I just talked about. And if it does, you will have some investor out there who believes in you and wants to bet on that. And you'll get a lot of no's, right? And you will get that. And that happens in every business. Every successful company that's out there today got their fair share of no's as well, as did we. But I think what happens is you get into that first world of taking capital, that first chapter, and you have to be very diligent and smart with it. You have to communicate with your investors, and you are partners. Yes, you sort of work for each other, but you need to go to them in great times. Go to them even more when times are tough. There is no investor in the world who thinks my entrepreneur never has a bad month, never has a bad quarter. And if you begin to behave like you are bending the truth and things like that, it will compound, and it will not be appreciated by people. And I think investors are human just as a business is human. The way that I look at it, I say, look, we may lose a month or two or three, but we'll win the year for sure. But every sport is like that, and business can be a sport that way. And this is my own opinion here. I think that people need to also realize there's no glory in raising capital. The glory is in creating value from the capital you raise. So everyone thinks it's really big. Oh, you raised 25 million bucks, high five. You raised 100 million bucks, high five. If I hit the ball back, I say, do you understand the capital that we have to return when you raise that? That is the real story, and it's an honor and a privilege to be able to be a funded startup doing something you love next to people that you love. You have to treat it that way. And what I like to say, and is there's a JFK quote that says, the time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. And something that I always repeat to people is that as you raise capital and you have that, you get tighter and better and faster and more efficient. And the other thing is that raising capital is a lot of fun. You learn a lot about yourself with all the no's, and you learn a lot about yourself with your investors who become your partners and your friends. And it's one of the most instructional moments in any business that not everybody gets to do. So we really enjoy it, and I think it's necessary. So first and foremost, I just want to say that I think there's a lot of studies on this, but co-founders are really important, and the chemistry and the respect and the trust that you have will directly correlate to your company's success. In fact, if you look at a lot of the successful companies that have gone from private to public, many of them are founder and co-founder led. And sometimes, the business outgrows what a co-founder or founders are capable of, and you have to be able to identify that. But how we got together is my other two co-founders actually met in New York and started the B2B business originally that I'm telling you about. And I was at HBO. And I was speaking at many conferences, CES in Las Vegas, Digital Hollywood, and one of my co-founders, Vin, approached me in 2007, and he wanted some help on the early business of Saavn. So we used to get together and talk about where the business should go and things to focus on. And then we just began to spend more time together and really think about the problem set here and where it could go. And then at some point, we realized that we might be the only people who can build something like this, because it has the sensibilities that we believe in, it's addressing a problem that we obviously care about, and we have a unique perspective, being sort of global South Asians. And that kicked it off. I can tell you over the half decade plus that we've all been together that your co-founders are your glue to each other. They are, times will get tough, times will be amazing as well. You don't want to do them alone. I always say that I think it's best to have stereo co-founders, meaning one technical and one business. Sometimes you can have them both in the same body, but if you look at modern businesses and app-based and technology-based businesses, if you have stereo co-founders, you can actually move very, very fast in those first quarters and those first years, right? You have a business concept, and you can hack it and get it out and test it and move very, very quickly, and be able to articulate it so that when you're in the capital conversations or you're hiring people, that you can, have the right skill sets to do that. Which brings me to the other half of your question. I think your skill sets, ego is a very human thing, and it's very hard to say that people don't have egos. To be great in an alpha company, you need some ego. You need humility, you need strength, but you need some ego, right? Some care and want to be the best. And I think the best way I can describe it is that if you look at like 360 degrees of a circle, what portion of those degrees is more or less valuable than the other? Really, none. They're all equivalent. It takes them all to make it work. And that's the way co-founders have to work. Sometimes all of the strength or the torque will go to, a co-founder or a set of co-founders, and sometimes it's spread evenly amongst all three. You need it for redundancy. You need it for leadership, and I think that your company will benefit. The culture of your company will come from your co-founders, right? Something that me and my co-founders work on every single day. It's how we hire people, and something that we really believe in, And I think it is a foremost defining factor in the success of a company, So you have to choose that wisely. So we actually have something in the company that we call Saavn 10. Okay, it's 10 principles. And the truth is everyone makes mistakes and gets off principle, but we treat culture incredibly seriously. We hire people for culture and skill. We'll not hire someone who's skilled who doesn't meet the culture. We will not hire someone who meets the culture but doesn't have the skill. You need both. There is a time in the company's life cycle, and every company has this, where you have these centers of maybe negativity or things like that. What will end up happening is it'll compound in your company, and it will lead to, I just said before, that your brand is a lagging indicator of everything inside. The more imbalanced you are inside, it will show in your products, your brand, your marketing. People can feel it, you can read it, So for us, culture is really important. You asked for 3, but I'll tell you, a couple of our key ones, okay, one is to put people first, right, because that's what this is about. You invest in great people and you lead great people, they will deliver great projects and great progress, right? The other is that we ask for everyone to invest in themselves. One of our tenets is, I say invest 1/24. So invest 1 hour out of 24 every day in your body. The gym, yoga, meditation, away from all these screens. Just do something that gives you perspective and gives you healthy mind and spirit, right? Or 2 out of 24, whatever it might be. But invest in yourself because it compounds in everything else that you do, right? And one of the others is just to understand that you have to really serve feedback hot. People will waste a lot of time being incredibly polite. And I'm not saying to be impolite, but I'm saying be professionally impolite. If something is not right or in the right sequence, you can steer companies the wrong way and waste a lot of capital because somebody didn't want to hurt someone's feelings. And what I think great companies come down to is something that comes from Jeff Bezos, who's the founder and CEO of Amazon, which is a company that most everyone looks up to. But it is about making really hard decisions, and at the end of the day, you will look back and you will realize you cannot make everybody happy, and if you try to make everybody happy, you will fail. You can make the net goal achieved and most people happy if you make very, very hard decisions. One decision you should not bend on is culture, because really every company makes the mistake, and then you'll pick up any book and people will tell you that they arrived at the fact that getting great culture was their key to success and escape velocity and tenacity and compounding growth. And you start small. You start with 2 co-founders, and as you build a thing, keep that culture strong. Keep it part of the backbone. You save a lot of time. When you have too many people with stretching product, okay? I have a funny analogy, and it's not, I'll just give you a car analogy everyone will get. If you have a fine pinpoint team working on products, you can get things that are, quite like a Ferrari, where they're beautiful and the details and the stitching and, the edges are right. The more people you get involved, it can get stretched and pulled and become kind of like a minivan, okay, which is very practical and it's good, but not so remarkable to people. And so I think that when you try to appease everyone, and we went through a state where no one wanted to make anyone upset and things like that, you start to get very gray. And the truth is that this is not about gray. This is about exceptional, and it's not about elite, but it is about exceptional. And in order to do that, you have to trust and know that not everything is going to get done perfectly as it might be in your book, but everything will move forward towards a common goal if you actually trust people. And I think there's a time when you go through this thing where somebody knows best, and the product guy wants to be a marketer, and the marketer wants to be a product guy, and the sales guy wants to be, running the company. And I think that when you take a step back and you realize, okay, let's everyone do what they're great at and leave the things that they're not great at to other people, you start to hit a rhythm in the business that's really important, and I think we hit it. I think a lot of companies have, now that we're past that point and focusing on culture and process, we fight to not lose that again. So I think one is you're building a business plan. You're putting down on paper what is your dream, basically, right? If you're building a business plan for a company that you are going to spend some amount of time in your life with, half decade, a decade, maybe longer, maybe shorter. So one is you have to be thoughtful and be truthful. And the best way to do that is don't write down what you think you want someone else to read. Write down what you believe you're going to build. And you know that. You know if you're telling the truth to yourself or not. So number one, I would say that. I would say that in terms of everything with a business plan, you need to keep things simple. And don't be so clever about things. Because the more you add, well, if this happens, and then this might happen, then we might do this, that fifth outcome literally has a sub 1% chance of happening. And everybody knows that. Instead, focus on, here's the first thing we're going to make happen. And as we achieve, that, at a majority stake, we'll move to this next sequence, right? That is very logical and clear to people. And that leads me to projections. I think that projections, especially at an early company, are very, very difficult. I would say be conservative about it. I think that you are going to raise capital, you're going to hire people on certain promises, and the more you miss targets, two things happen. One is that you lose confidence, and your investors lose confidence in your ability to project. But the worst thing that happens is that your team loses confidence in their ability to win. And so lowering goalposts and being able to hit them and exceed them, not make them easy, actually has a compounding effect. It has an effect the same way you teach a kid how to ride a bike. And the one thing that you don't do is break someone's confidence that they can ride a bike. And so the same thing here is you don't break a team's confidence that they can win. You set goals that are achievable. If you have some data, line project it forward. If you don't have data, wait until you have data before you build the projections. No one is asking you in month 3 of your business, what is month 72 going to look like? No one knows that, right? So you don't have to do that, right? And I think you will find like-minded investors, like-minded people to be a part of the business. And, again, this is a credit to the content that you guys are building, but these are lessons everyone has to learn the hard way, and I think that the hard part is adhering to these things. The hard part is not, saying them, but there is, some wisdom in that. Keeping it simple, I think, be conservative about those projections, and, make sure that you enable your team to hit goals, be it user, engagement, revenue, whatever it might be. That alone will help the business compound, right? Just the confidence in that. We launched Saavn Radio about a year and a half after we launched the first apps, okay? So it's about 2013 maybe. And noticed a wild difference between Android and iOS users. And to the point where, you start saying to yourself, oh, maybe iOS users just don't like radio, and Android users do like radio. And then you start believing that. But then one day, I asked our data scientists, I said, can you pull me the data events on this button on the upper right-hand corner? And the button was how you flipped between radio and regular streaming. I said, pull me that event for both products. And he did. And Android had an 89% click rate on this number, meaning people were in and out of it. iOS had an 11% click rate. Humans are not that different. We had left the button off one page in the app, the player page where everyone lives in iOS, inadvertently. And the app was live for 6 months. And you look at the data and you laugh about it, and then you're embarrassed about it, and then you go and fix it. But there's something that just screamed at us for 6 months. We lost a lot of usage because we literally left a button off of a page. And that's where it's one of those things that makes you go, wow. And now what else can we uncover, right? In terms of how people are behaving. Things you can do with the smartphone are just mind blowing with data. So anyway, there's an example. So I think one is that you're going to have a rapid just uptake of the platform because people are moving and changing behaviors, right? A couple of important things that are happening. I'm the transition generation, meaning I bought tapes, I bought CDs, then I stole music for a while, then I downloaded MP3s, then streaming. But my kids are born in the cloud. They are born streaming. And when you have 8 and 9-year-olds who are walk into a restaurant and they ask for the Wi-Fi password, you have a different generation on your hands. So number one is you're building for a generation that's born in the cloud. I think two is that you're going to see ubiquity in terms of access to the same thing. So you pause your music in your car and you pick it up in your home and it picks it up from the same spot. This is all already happening and in development. And I think you're going to see the car, be a very important part of it. It's a very important use case for music specifically. The home and work are sort of captured. That third piece is really the car. The car is lagging by 20 years in terms of technology and intelligence and data, and it's a phenomenal use case for entertainment, especially, but definitely for music in all cases. So I think you'll see a lot more of that. And I think you will see the artist side change as well. Especially in India, you'll see that content that had to be married to film can now just be content. It can just be a writer or a performer, independent artist, because streaming will be able to bring them to the masses without it having to be coupled with the film and being in the theater. So those are seismic changes, I think, that we're hopefully a small part of. And I think, I didn't think about the question before you asked, but I think that what UpGrad is doing, I think, is a seismic shift in terms of access to information that flattens, the classroom across the world. I think that the lessons that you guys are bringing to the table for people is not only going to sharpen people who are on the cusp of starting a business, it's going to inspire people who didn't know that they wanted to start a business. I went to school to be an orthodontist, and go into dentistry, and I deferred that by 1 year. That was 17 years ago. Now, I'm very far away from that, but that was based off of, gut and trailblazing. And you read things and you get inspired by different stories. I think the stories and the education that you are bringing to the table is going to impact, the entire millennial generation, first of all. And I think it's, this is the new platform, for education. So I think you guys are doing a great job.